Well, hopefully the levels on this one are acceptable. I'll try turning... Oh, not gonna do that. Just getting the game up and running. And then we can take a look and see how... Alright, did that... Okay, I'm assuming that the... Yeah, okay. Alright, I'm just gonna pick up from where we were. My son is in the chair over here asleep. He's had a rough couple of days, probably going through some sort of probably going through some sort of growth spurt right now. We'll see how he does. I know that we started this and never really got anywhere with it, but yeah, just gonna pick up from where I was, and hopefully everybody's doing okay. There are probably people screaming right now because they're sitting there going, why have you not got it sent? And it's because I can still center everything without having to make it... to me, it's not about being centered so much as it being symmetrical. And that's where it becomes a problem in later versions of dungeons where there is no symmetry. You go there, you go there, you go there. Yeah, it's been a week, just about, since the last time we did any kind of live stream or anything like that, and it's been a busy day, and I decided to take some time to just not be working on editing the books. It's getting there. I'm through a bunch more chapters on the print stuff. As people might have seen, there's been some progress made with getting the music out. Trying to get the music out in a timely manner, but sometimes a little bit more difficult than others, especially depending on the kids' schedule and moods. Having a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old is not easy. I would say that I wish that someone had told me that it wasn't going to be easy, but I mean, realistically, who's looking at having a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old and going, oh, that's going to be really easy. Anyway, trying to remember what exactly I called this live stream. I think it was that your treasury is too small. Kind of wanted to discuss that in terms of the books. Now, it's not necessarily a one-for-one translation. I mean, without context it doesn't make any sense, but one of the things that I definitely wanted to talk about and get into was the and I know that I kind of mentioned it briefly earlier in the other podcast, in the other live stream, where it becomes not engaging to have no threats, and wanting to create situations where characters, especially like with the Champions Guild, I believe I mentioned, characters are having to be creative with the ways that they take care of issues, because there isn't that magical everything's going to work out, everything's going to be just fine, and there might be an element of, you know, we need to think outside the box, we need to do something a little bit creative. And that's kind of where I think the whole thing of thinking about what your treasury is like and what your income is like, and just kind of how the economics of the world work. When I developed the Shulgotha stuff, I didn't really think too hard about what the economic situation was going to be, because it's, you know, it's demons. It's they function entirely differently. They don't necessarily exist within a capitalist society. With the Champions Guild stuff, that's not necessarily the case. We have people who have the same kind of wants and needs as we do as human beings, and we kind of have to assume that there is a baseline there that people need to achieve. I'm just going to try something real quick. No, it doesn't count. Okay. But there's a baseline that we need to achieve, and so we have to sit there and look at it in the context of, okay, what is, you know, what is something that everybody needs? Food, shelter, and then kind of trying to figure it out from there of, if magic were available, as magic is available in the Champions Guild stuff, what does that look like, and how does that change things? And you very quickly get into a situation where you oh, I don't have a lair built, that's why. There's my... Oh, I do have a lair built, it's right there. We're gonna build it here. We're gonna build the lair right there, we're gonna build the hatchery right here. How does magic affect it, basically, is where you become it becomes an interesting question. And one of the ones that I always think back to is people sitting there and saying, well, if mages existed, you know, you wouldn't have any issues. You would be able to put the mages in the middle of the desert. There wouldn't be any scarcity for water, because mages would be able to either create the water or use some sort of magic to divine where the water would be. You had entire civilizations that wouldn't need to roam looking for water, they'd be able to establish, and so you'd not really have a nomadic group, because there wouldn't be reasons to travel, which you can then counter by sitting there and saying, well, I'm going to introduce this other magical instance where there is a reason to travel, because, you know, something else exists. Maybe it's a threat that keeps them wandering, maybe there's something else that basically incentivizes them to not put down roots for whatever reason. You know, maybe there's a religious aspect or something where you're not able to just stop in place. Your religion compels you to seek something out. That feels like probably the most easily direct way of describing it is I'm not allowed to stop. I'm on a religious quest to find X, and if I stop for whatever reason, I'll be exiled from, exiled from my caste or something like that. So by and large, I guess you could say that magic solves most problems, but in order to keep things interesting, you kind of have to reintroduce those problems to make sure that things don't grow stale. Which, is a challenge all by itself. And I guess what I'm getting at is, why would you base your entire your economy on something like gold if you had alchemists, or just in general something that can create whatever scarcity you have in abundance? And the best answer there is, I guess really the best answer is any answer. If you have mages, if you have any kind of wizarding group, there is no reason why they couldn't at any point turn around and do this, unless you put those limits in there and you stop, I was going to say the players there, but you stop them from just being able to cakewalk everything. So the way that I've built it is very similar in the Champions Guild to how it exists in real life, where you have finite currencies, finite resources, and that is the basis for most, if not all, of the countries in the world to be based off of. It doesn't have to be exhaustive necessarily. There are some that don't really recognize gold because it's either considered not worth anything, or it's considered of limited worth, whereas other alternatives perhaps exist. I'm thinking of magical resources basically. I'm thinking of situations where there's no benefit to having just gold, but if you have access to a resource that makes spells more potent, if you have access to a resource where you can do something unique with it, maybe it's really good for enchanting into spellcloth or into some sort of not all dwarf runes are created equally. It depends on the skill of the craftsman, and it depends on the materials being used. You can't just have a dwarf walk up to a piece of stone and sit there and go, I'm going to just carve something into this and have it work in the same vein as if they were doing it on high quality material. That's just not... You could. You absolutely could, but I don't think that that really sets anything up, because then you get into the whole thing of you know, what are the stakes if you don't have access to it? And one of the things that I'm trying very hard to get across with the way that I write things is you've got to go prepared into a situation. Alan's a great example. Alan's a rifleman. He doesn't have access to spells that he can just pull out of the middle of nowhere. He has to know what he's going up against when he's putting his kit together, and if for whatever reason he's not given enough forewarning, then he has to improvise. And being a rifleman, he has limited ways of improvising because he is reliant on see, I want to put a guard room here, but if I try to do that, it's not going to work with that. It's going to mess that up. If we did that. Sorry, just indulging in my ADHD and my OCD for a minute. If Alan's not prepared, then bad things happen. Being able to create that kind of cause and effect where someone isn't ready, someone isn't at the top of their game where they need to be, and it has a knock-on effect for other characters. I think that's one of the things that people enjoy the most about some, maybe not all, but at least some of the existing literature, where they can sit there and say, I like the idea that there are characters that struggle and overcome, or I like the idea that there are characters that are made to suffer the consequences of whatever it is they have done, and sometimes those consequences are rough. I mean, I have my scruples with some of the ways that Game of Thrones is written, but one of the ways that comes across that is memorable is you have characters that die, and they die because of situations that they perhaps should or could have planned out for, or they otherwise have something happen that affects them as a character. I always think of the one, I mean, I was going to say spoilers, but I mean, at this point, is it really a spoiler? Situation where Jaime Lannister loses his hand, and suddenly you have a character that was basically identifiable by his ability to wield a sword, who is suddenly in a situation where he can no longer wield the sword, or at least not in the way that he could, and it's a very character defining moment because it takes him from being a character that is a bit of an ass and not likable, and forces him to be reevaluated within a different scope. And I know that there are people that don't like him even after that happens, and that's perfectly understandable considering he was a very divisive character and a big mover and shaker for a lot of the things that went on in that. And it doesn't have to be things that happen inside the story. There are backstories and things like that that definitely have some sort of impact on how your characters interact with the world and the reasons for doing it. It gets very bland when all of your characters act the same because they've all had the same exposure to everything. and not necessarily trying to justify the bad behaviour, but being able to sit there and say, you know, it's trying to avoid the whole thing of, well, that's just the way that my character would react to this. It's not, it's, you know, what my character would do. I don't want to lean in that direction because, by and large, that's not fun. People don't enjoy the whole it's within character for my character sort of thing. I don't want to say things just to ruin the experience. Sometimes it makes more sense for a character to act out of character, give them another justification for it, sit there and say that they were, you know, sometimes characters are tired, sometimes characters just don't act within what's considered normal for them. Maybe the exception rather than the rule, but you've got to kind of balance what's realistic for the character with how they would feasibly react if something were to happen. Trying to think of a good example of another character that I've got that had something. I mean, a lot of the life-changing stuff that happened for most of the characters in the Champions Guild pretty much happened before the novel started, because I didn't want to have to go through it's an established guild, and so the characters already have whatever trauma brought them to the guild. They're at the guild necessarily in a lot of cases because they have a problem that they need help dealing with. Rosie is obviously the big one that comes to mind. Young girl has a life-changing event that requires her to reevaluate pretty much everything about herself, and there's some metaphor there. I'm not going to say that there's not metaphor there, because I think that if you're not putting metaphors behind things, then you're missing out on a trick. Sometimes it's fun just to have parallels, even accidental ones, that you can draw from. But she's gone through this life-changing experience. She's gone through it basically alone as far as she feels, because Rosie has never been the sort of character that wants to... We're already done with this map, and we were a long way from being finished. I'll just go ahead and save this, maybe we'll come back to it. And then we got a dwarf in there, and we'll work our way up. Discovery. It's not easy being Rosie. It's not easy when you have an idea of how the world should be run, and it's all torn away out from underneath you. The downside to being Rosie, or one of the downsides to being Rosie, is that she is fiercely independent, doesn't really need anybody to take care of things for her. She relies on Alan for most, if not all, of what's going on, and having that singular source of reliance is great unless you suddenly lose it. and that's kind of where the first book comes in. And there's going to be other books that delve into their relationship a little bit further along, or actually not further along, further in the past, their relationship as it was when they'd freshly arrived at the guild. I've got a couple of them already written out, and I realised that one of the things that I was really missing from the two of them was the ability to look back at what they've been doing and going, oh yeah, I've got, you know, this character. I haven't really gone into anything explaining why she is the way that she is. It comes out in bits and pieces. But I really want to make it clear why she's afraid of these things, why she hates or doesn't hate, you know, why she's outside of the norm. Rosie is very not normal as far as most children, champions, proteges would go. It's intentional. She's curious by design, and part of the reason for that is to make her a character that forces, I guess forces change is a good way of putting it. I didn't want her to be just another member of the guild. We've already got members of the guild, we don't need a temple. We've got characters like Francis and Marlon, where they've already come to the guild and they're broken. We've already got characters like Suthos who have joined the guild for other various reasons and don't explicitly need the guild and its resources for apparently anything, and have joined it for maybe their own amusement or maybe for some other purpose that hasn't been made clear. Characters like Amalia, who have had to join the guild for their own safety or for the safety of others. Characters like Leonard, who are looking for redemption or a way of basically apologizing for things that may or may not be outside of their control. But yeah, Rosie comes to the guild almost fully formed. The worst thing about her at the time that she joins is her associations, which are not necessarily her fault. I say not necessarily her fault, they're not her fault. You can't be blamed for your associations when you're, you know, at the age that she joined. At the time that she joined, she was 8 years old. You can't blame an 8-year-old for who they've been around for the, you know, most of their life. I say knowing people who blame children for things that are outside of the realm of what children can be realistically expected to do. No, I've claimed the prison. Okay, cool. She's able to create drama because she comes to the guild with different expectations. Oh, by the way, I hate this fucking map. I probably shouldn't swear. I hate this map. The fact that I don't have structure. This entire map can go suck it. Hopefully this one will go pretty quick as well, because I have no desire to. We'll explore it pretty quick here, but limited desire to linger too long with this one. Rosie is a deliberate point of friction. Most of the characters are in some ways deliberate points of friction. Usually the characters are points of friction with Rosie, since she is the eyes of the reader. She's in a lot of ways, and Francis and some of the other characters, especially when they're outside of their element, given the opportunity to really look into a situation from a fresh perspective without having to completely reframe. Isekai comes to mind, or transported to another world. You have a character that already knows some things or knows nothing at all. Transported to another world, you have to explain all of the rules of the world. You have to sit there and navigate around what is and is not possible within that world. It can get tedious. It's like I've said in the last live stream, it's one of the reasons why I deliberately have been vague with some of the Shulgotha stuff, just because I don't want to have to sit there and build out every single detail to dump on the reader the second that they open the book, because that gets overwhelming. I know it gets overwhelming because I've read books where that happens. Really more just looking for a place where I can drop the reader and it's relatable, which is why Rosie and the Champions Guild is set in a recognizable part of the world. It's generic medieval fantasy, at least in this area, because this is the area that I wanted to explore first. There are other parts of the world, like the Orkani homeland and areas with the dwarves, where it's very different. It's almost unrecognizable, but you don't really want to start there because it doesn't give you a good focal point by which to gauge what's normal and what's not. A lot of it's not normal. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of the fantasy genre, is that you don't have anything that's normal. Everything is unique, individual. Fantastic is probably the best way of describing it. And I guess if you're just, you might as well be writing historical fiction if you're going to be writing a fantasy book with no fantasy elements. Even if it's just, oh yeah, we've got magic. Or it's just, oh yeah, we've got elves. That's not a lot, but it's something to work with. And once you have that, you can explore other things. I think a big part of the appeal of fantasy is the unique conflict that arrives, because you've got cultures that clash, and there are instances where there are arguments that wouldn't come up naturally between races of humans. Issues with biology and things like that. And these are all things that I try and explore a little bit. Very interested in a lot of the conflicts in history, things like the Crusades, where you have people of mirroring conviction all fighting over essentially the same or similar resources or land. fighting for almost the exact same reason in a lot of cases. I mean, part of the history of the UK is the issues with Northern Ireland. There was a lot that went on there that wasn't good for anyone. A lot of suffering for the sake of suffering. A lot of things that I as a person don't necessarily understand. I like when things make sense and follow rules and things like that, and when you've got people who are being awful just for the sake of being awful, I kind of struggle with that. And that was pretty much characteristic of, I mean, if not just my country, but most countries of the time. It makes it difficult to bring that level of realism into the writing, because it's the sort of thing that I'd rather shy away from, because I don't feel like people really want to read that. You know, people don't necessarily want to read about all of the injustices that go on between Group A and Group B. But to diversify the story and really tell the story the way that it needs to be told, sometimes it is a matter of sitting there and saying, hey, I know that this is uncomfortable, but this is how, you know, dwarves are treated in this society. This might suck, but this is actually how women are treated in this society. One of the things that makes it very difficult to write some of the stuff, because I don't, on the one hand, want to shy away from it. I mean, it's very front and center with some of the Shulgotha stuff. I don't want to shy away from it, but at the same time I also don't want to acknowledge it in a lot of cases, because it's uncomfortable. It's sometimes difficult to give voices to characters that I would rather didn't speak. For a long time, Jack in particular had been one of those voices, because I didn't want to have a lot of time paid to a character that was ruthless and vindictive and all of these sorts of things, and part of the way to fix that has been by making sure that he's not written as a one-dimensional character. I think that it would fix a lot of things if people would look at characters and not see them as being one-dimensional. It's something I think that people fall into the trap of doing with politicians a lot. And we sit there and we see them say or do things that doesn't make any sense, that is so far removed from what we would do in reality that it feels like they're on another planet when they, you know, when they say something, when they do something. And somebody pointed something out to me that really was rather striking. They used the reference of George W. Bush, and in one of the press conferences he sits there and he says, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, won't get fooled again. And a lot of people mocked that, because us in the real world, we know that that's not the saying and that's not how it goes. And at the time it really made him seem like he was out of touch. And that wasn't the situation, it was that he quickly realized, because of the circumstances he was in as president, etc., etc., he couldn't really afford to have an audio clip of him saying shame on me at a time where the war in Iraq was going on. And so he pivots, but normal people don't need to pivot based on an audio clip most of the time. And so the idea that he was pivoting in that situation didn't occur to most people. They just saw him bungle a very simple and straightforward line that, I mean, damn near anybody in the country could have told him what the line was supposed to be and be right. Very different priorities, and thinking outside the box like that doesn't necessarily come intuitively to someone like me who, you know, you have a saying and that's the way the saying goes. There isn't a lot of the time I'm very surprised when I hear other versions of a saying that I've grown up with all my life. I have a very fixed perspective. The ones that really come to mind are the, you know, blood is thicker than water, and you grow up with that all your life, and you hear it so many times to the point that you're almost sick of hearing it, but then you come to find out that the full saying is that the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. And it turns the whole thing on its head, and it's like, oh, there's an entire perspective that I had essentially taken for granted, that I am now in this position of reviewing my stance on, because it never occurred to me that someone would be able to successfully argue this idea that the choices that you make are more important than the choices that you're given, or rather the choices that you're not even given, the choices that are made for you. Oh my god. Angry Warlock. Where's the vampires? Do you have wares? Warlock is unhappy because he hasn't been paid. Where's my money? There's my money. Boop. There we go. it really forces me to look at other characters, and Aberdeen Tynan in the Shulgotha stuff. Originally just a demon that was going mad, and I had to take a look at that and sit there and say, okay, is this actually all that's going on, or is there something else that is working in the background, and really exploring whether I wanted to make it as one-dimensional as he's going mad and therefore he's acting irrationally, or whether there is rationale for what he's doing and why he's doing it. Yeah, we'll just call it there. I think that's enough of the pet dungeons for right now. Let's just keep going with where we were on the campaign. I think this is the one that we looked at before. Lord Ironhelm. You know what, I think that this is one of those ones where you have to choose one or the other and it locks you out of the other choice. I'm not in the mood for doing route right now, so we will do this one. And then we will come back to, let me save it real quick. Actually, you know what I can do? I can save it when I start. And then, if I need to, I will... Yeah, we looked at this one last time. Just call it Ironhelm there. Donate skeletons, so we'll just kill these guys. You know what, if I do that, they're gonna start trying to do that instead of working. That's fine. Yeah.
You have successfully interrogated an enemy creature in the torture chamber. Map information has been divulged by the victim in the torture chamber.
Palantir was originally also a very one-dimensional character that I had to work out a little bit because it made it so that there were more plot points available for me to explore. Gave me the opportunity to make him more unlikable. Not that he needed to necessarily be more unlikable, he was already a pretty awful character. But, you know, why settle for a pretty awful character when you can have one that's absolutely loathsome? At least then you have the satisfaction when something happens to him of knowing that it was deserved. Or you have the frustration when something doesn't happen to him, of feeling like something should, and being able to be invested with the hopes that something... Okay, we will need skeletons. Alright, goblins, mistresses, those guys, and these guys. This is way overkill for what's about to happen, but whatever. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I need skeletons, so we'll get those running. But again, like I said, I'm interested in the straightforward stuff, so it's not second nature for me to build out a character with the idea that they're not going to immediately get some sort of comeuppance.
Discovered a magical item. Your creative experiment been upgraded.
Mistresses are very overpowered in this game.
You have successfully interrogated
Especially if you
map information has been divulged.
know how to cheat the system.
A creature has died in your prison and has risen as a skeleton.
Thunderbolt spell has been upgraded. With Valon, I've had the other kind of problem. I've got a character that... let's get you at level 4 first, and then we'll drag you off to do something else. I have a character that has too much potential to be well-rounded, and I can create too much with him, and I need him to kind of pickle in and stick with it so that so that the story can progress without being overwhelming. It's too tempting to make Valon a one-size-fits-all, he can do anything he needs to sort of character. I don't want him to be that kind of character. I want him to have flaws, I want him to have deficiencies. He doesn't like it when I say that I want him to have these things, but unfortunately he's not the one that gets to decide this. I need him to not be able to do everything, because otherwise what's the point in having any other characters there with him? If Valon can do everything and doesn't need anybody else, then may as well just have Valon go off and solo everything. Part of my frustrations with a lot of the anime that comes out, you got the main character that can pretty much do anything that they want. Overlord really comes to mind. You got an overpowered player character in a world of NPCs. Pretty much doing what I'm doing right now, sitting there and just absolutely laying waste to everything. Because what can realistically do anything to stop him? What's under attack? Oh, okay. Should we keep using Warlock? Sprung? Shroud? Shroud's a pretty cool name. Yeah, we'll get Warlock. I figure we'll finish this one and then call it. And there's not going to be too much to do at this rate. This is still fairly early Dungeon Keeper and the levels are still fairly straightforward. Don't need you. We'll get that here in a sec. And that's what we need skeletons for. What is that magical item? Makes minions one level stronger. Well, let's see if we can get all the way over to... Yeah.
I've got a poopy diaper. He's waking up.
Okay.
The poopy.
We will be back in a minute. get going again.
The very rock yearns with anticipation to emit a A hero king surrounded by his fellow
Okay,
beings
talk about the merch one day.
seeks to function
The last one?
While you're ramping back up again, take a minute to do
Yeah.
business.
So one of the things I want to push is, I don't know if people have seen it, but we've got our merch Monday. And our merch in general, yeah. One of the last ones that we talked about was candles.
Candles again this week.
Candles again this week.
Different candles.
These are different. They're very nice. I'm not a huge candle person personally, but they're beeswax. They smell pretty nice. They're made with yeah, I said beeswax. I've got this, don't worry.
Oh, okay, sorry.
They're made in the shapes of different things.
No, not these ones.
The ones from last week, I think there were things like turtles. I think there was mess. There was turtles. There was a lot of different things that we didn't actually pull a lot of it into stock, but there was a lot of stuff that we could pull into stock if people were showing interest. They're nice. I don't know if they're my sort of thing. Maybe they're not your sort of thing. Maybe they are. We're trying to come up with what we think people would like. Giving people the opportunity to buy high quality, nice, you know. We've seen enough stores where it's crap. We've seen enough stores where it's you're buying stuff that's been mass produced in, I'm going to say China because it's almost always China. It's not nice stuff. It's not very expensive, but you're getting what you're paying for. We've seen way too many stores like that. We're trying desperately to get away from stores where the idea is to just mass produce and throw it out there, and we're basically trying to make it so that people are happy with their purchases. We're trying to do something with a little bit of quality so that people look at this stuff and say, yeah, we want to go back and buy some of this other stuff. Some of the stuff that we've got on there is absolutely beautiful. There are knives, axes, there are what else is on the store? There's briefcases.
What you've been talking about today,
Yeah.
we have the Champion Zone kit, the whole kit.
Yeah, we put a kit together that's kind of
There's
a little bit of everything for
Prototype
people.
kit and the Champion kit.
The idea that it's the stuff that a champion would have. We'll be able to call it after this. I've got a boy back there that's not happy.
Rolling pin.
Bread baskets, rolling pins. If people are interested, definitely go and check it out. I'll make sure that that stuff is linked to this video when we get that far. I'll put together a little bit more of a agenda and itinerary for the next time we talk so that it's not so roundabout. I got a couple of things that I could have gone into, but, you know, kids. He doesn't feel well. Anyway, that's, a little bit more of Dungeon Keeper done,
No.
and yeah, it locked you out of that one if you chose that, so then you're stuck doing, this is actually not a bad mission, but we'll call it there. Yeah, I appreciate anybody that's watched, and we'll talk again soon. Bye for now.